Welcome back. Now let's take you straight to Benue State once again, this time in Yawata, and talk about the incidents, the insecurity crisis, the Benue massacre, whichever acronym or name you choose to call it. Let's look at the president's, his presence yesterday. We do have joining us very quickly. We have the Youth Party chairmanship candidate for Etiosa local government area, and of course a communication expert and the public affairs analyst joins us this morning, AYODELE Adio. Good morning, and thanks for staying with us this morning. First off, I'm sure while you were in the waiting room, you also may have gotten a glimpse of our interview with Senator Daramado as well. I don't know what your take is about the fact that he made it clear that there is no padding in the 2025 budget, that everything that was said by budget was just mere speculations and not facts.
Well, I mean, I caught a glimpse of that conversation, and it will be, I'm sure the budget can defend themselves with some of the positions that they took with regards to the budget. However, I mean, every Nigerian can see that the typical Nigerian budget, is usually filled with a lot of inanities, a lot of provisions that mean nothing to the Nigerian people. Some of the provisions, they are overly inflated. The estimations are quite wild in certain instances. There are lots of repetitions, across MDAs and government agencies. You also find that, agencies are trying to attempt to do things that are outside the scope of their terms of reference. So you really and truly have a budget that hardly sometimes reflects the realities or the pressing issues that the Nigerian people are faced with. And it's some sort of budget that is usually skewed to the interest of the political class. So he can make the argument that, these documents aren't padded because the National Assembly indeed has the power of the purse and appropriation, and that's a fact. But the truth is, you can see that we are not spending on priorities. Our spending is skewed, towards political lines as against what should be driving economic progress and what should be stimulating the economy in a way that lifts people out of poverty. And that, for me, is the biggest concern. You just don't have our budgets aren't sensible. You have wild estimations. Sometimes our projections are short of reality, and oftentimes you just see that the spending are just sometimes inexplainable, and that's really the tragedy that we face.
Let's now bring the conversation back to what's happening in Benue State and the current reality. The president has visited Benue State. We've seen, in the conversation we had earlier, we had our initial guest talking about that being a very good move and being timely, the timely response of the government. Do you agree with the timeliness and the response and the manner in which the response has happened? Do you think that that has bolstered, created some measure of optimism in the state? And or do you have a different opinion to the president's visit of Benue State?
Of a state visit, where the president had to entertain senior political officials from that state in what appeared like a banquet. The truth is, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand said recently, what is empathy without action? And what the people of Benue are actually expecting from their president is not necessarily a visit at a banquet. What they want to see is action. And the action that they want to see is that their communities are protected and that the criminals who perpetuate these dastardly acts are brought to justice. And unfortunately, there's a lot of simple talk. There's a lot of politicking. There's a lot of mere words or empty words being thrown around. And there's very little action that goes to the heart of the problem that the people of Benue are constantly having to grapple with. They are burying their loved ones every single week. They are tired of crying. They want a commander-in-chief that will live up to the dictates of the Constitution, which is the protection of life and property. And on that particular score, the president is failing. And so the idea that, the president should be commended for getting on a plane and visiting Benue. In fact, not even the community that was attacked, I must note, because he claimed that the road was bad and it was raining and he couldn't access it. And so he went straight to the banquet. And we must also add the shameful act of having to line up children under the rain to welcome a president when his state was mourning. I think was also very shameful, very distasteful, and does not portray the kind of urgency and leadership required to deal with this problem. You still have a group of politicians who are more concerned about the image of their principal, the image of their political party, than the bloodletting that is happening in communities. And that is grossly misleading, because you're not going to be able to solve this problem if all you have around the political leadership is sycophancy and not the urgency required to deal with this problem. I'm not going to play this tokenist, game of the president visited, Benue, and we should be all clapping hands. There's been 17,000 people killed in violent crimes across the country since this president took office in May 2023. And this bloodletting has continued. We cannot continue to accept this as the norm. It's not normal that people have to die this needlessly and this consistently in our country. It is not normal, and something has to give. So we should and must refrain from simply, throwing our hands up because a president went to visit somewhere. I mean, nothing has changed fundamentally. If I asked you today, for instance, what has changed on the ground? What strategy has changed? Nothing whatsoever. It's business as usual. And if you listen to the things that he said on that ground, you will understand that, again, the president, I don't know if it is deliberate, continues to misunderstand the problem. Even when the tortive clearly articulated what the issues are, the president consistently said, go and reconcile, it's one family. I don't understand this. I don't.
Well, it's a tough one, but I mean, for us to have you here, it also, you've spent so much time as a communications expert, and I like your insight into what we saw yesterday. So permit me to just highlight some of the aspects, and I like your reaction to it. As one who has spent years, also working with people in government and also being a politician yourself, you've worked hard to ensure that communication, especially what is written and what is being communicated to the people at different circumstances, is well scrutinized, well put together, and ensure that the thoughts that are being shared by the image or the personality is one that people would listen to and, give a pass mark. How would you rate, one, the president's speech yesterday in the midst of what happened? And secondly, if you look at the back and forth that took place yesterday, where the president inadvertently, the open, scolded, as it were, the IGP, asking him that how come nobody has been arrested? How would you put all of this in terms of communication together? What do you think played out?
So, first of all, I think I was completely disappointed with the speech of the president. And I was disappointed because of three things. The first is that the president at no point accepted responsibility for the protection of lives and property in Benue, which is his number one priority as commander-in-chief. He consistently passed the buck, whether it was to the governor or to certain traditional rulers in the state, or to simply, talk down on the people of that state, to simply embrace their criminals and cuddle the terrorists that were killing them by seeking reconciliation, when, in other words, what should have happened should be a direct charge to clamp down on the criminality that is ongoing in Benue. The second, obviously, is that there was also lacking a clear strategic roadmap to get out of the mess that the people of Benue are currently experiencing. There was no clearly articulated plan from the president as to how his administration was going to pursue the tackling of this level of criminality in that state. Clearly not articulated by the president. Thirdly, and even more importantly, I did not sense a sense of urgency in the speech from the president that clearly state, and mind you, if you remember when the president was campaigning, he talked about things like setting up, some sort of anti-terrorism battalion that will deal with terrorists like this, especially in the Northwest and the Middle Belt and part of the country. There was no mention of that, or there was no, highlight of whether he was going to pursue that strategy going forward. What you saw was a roll call of his senior security chiefs, from the police to the chief of defense staff. I mean, it looked to me like it was theater, right? And you have to ask yourself, like you rightfully said, how can people come into a community, kill hundreds of people that would have taken hours to perpetuate, and then not a single resistance from a state security architecture? I mean, that is mind-boggling. And the question should be miffed, the president, should be miffed by that. That how can you have a situation where criminals can attack a community and kill 200 people, and the attack will go on for hours and will not face the slightest of resistance from any security agent? I mean, in instances like this, in countries that are serious about protecting their citizens, there should be sacks by this morning. You can't hold your job as a commissioner of police. You can't hold your job as an IG of police, that your security apparatus could not even provide the slightest of resistance to a group of terrorists who attacked the community for hours and killed 200. I mean, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. No sense to me whatsoever. So the speech was very underwhelming, especially because the president continued to misunderstand the problem, whether it was deliberate or whether it was poor advice, from his team. But he consistently, deliberately, well, not deliberately, but it appeared deliberate to misunderstand the problem. Even when the tortive made it clear what the issues were in Benue, the president seemed insistent on the people coddling the criminals that were killing them, to reconcile, to live as one family. And I found out extremely worrying, because if that is the thinking behind the problem in Benue, then I'm afraid these killings will continue.
All right.
I'm afraid.
I mean, everyone is worried, but let's hope and see that the president's presence yesterday will indeed yield positive results. Well, thank you so much, Adio, for joining us. We look forward to have you again, and most importantly, also talk about what you're doing for the local government chairmanship spot. Thanks for your time. Thank you for joining us.